I sometimes wish that I would have started out working for someone else, because there was all the tricks that you learn that I had to figure them out myself for the most part, or just read about them, because I didn't work for any other DP. So it was pretty rough at the beginning trying to figure out how to do things, especially like some of the night exteriors and driving sequences. I had no idea how they did it, So I was constantly researching, reading books and stuff, and just kind of learned on my own. I started out doing photography as a kid when I was about 10. I built a darkroom in my closet, and then I bought a Super 8 camera from a friend of my sister's. And as soon as I shot the first 50 feet of film, I was totally hooked. I was making movies. So I started making little films. Instead of doing reports, English papers and stuff, I would convince the teacher to let me make movies. So that's what I did. I just started making Super 8 movies. And I realized I'm going to LA, that's where I wanted to go and work on films. When I first started out, I actually just gaffed one movie. It was a little low-budget horror movie called Bits and Pieces. And after we worked that movie, I thought, I could make a movie. So I convinced my friend back in Waco, Texas, that we could do it for very little money. So we raised $30,000, and we made a movie called Ghost Riders. I was the DP, he directed, we co-produced, co-edited. Then I moved back to LA, hopefully going to get a job doing as an AC, and I get hired. I also did some effects work, some pyro, and which I wasn't supposed to do. But so I got a job doing some pyro on a low-budget movie called Creepazoids. And right before it was about to shoot, the DP, the original DP, had to leave. So the director, David Dakota, asked me if I would shoot his movie, which was Creepazoids. So I shot it. That was my first time to use 35 millimeter. And then the editor recommended me to Roger Corman, and then I just started shooting. So I never really worked the camera department. I was very lucky and just started out as a cinematographer. Back in, I think it was 94, I was hired by Steve White and Barry Bernardi to DP a movie that a friend of mine was directing, Jeff Burr. It was called Night of the Scarecrow. That's where I met Steve. And Night of the Scarecrow, it was a weird thing. I think Steve and Barry were kind of splitting up their partnership. So it was kind of an odd film. We were very under budgeted, But I got to meet Steve and Barry, and then when Steve got this film, he asked me to shoot it. So, which I was surprised that he even really knew who I was, but that's how I got the job. We ended up going to a house out in, I think it's Santa Clarita. It was a brand new house. I don't think the family even have moved in yet. And it was like, the ground was just dirt. It was a huge house, but it was very strangely built. It had these massive stairwell and hallways, but the bedrooms were really small. And so it made it really difficult to shoot. And I was really trying to convince them not to use that house because the bedrooms were like closets. But they ended up using it, and then we ended up building on stage several of the rooms where the big effects sequence would take place, and shot all the exteriors there on location. And those days did tend to be pretty long just because of all the gags and the fire and makeup effects. At that point, my normal gaffer, Jim Spencer, was not available, and he recommended, I believe it was Sean Cohen. I can't remember for sure. It's been so long. So, and I think he was Jim's best boy or something at some point. So he gaffed it. I believe Brad Heiner was the key grip. And it was just, as usual, just people I know and who's available. Well, when we would shoot these small bedrooms, the day exteriors weren't as bad because I had a condor, a lift that I could shoot light through the windows, but they couldn't afford it every day, so there were days I didn't have that, which made it difficult. Then on the night stuff, it was mostly Chinese lanterns and small practicals. We shot 35 millimeter back in the day, and unfortunately we had a camera. It was the Arri 535A, which was the studio camera, and it was really heavy. And so it was a little difficult maneuvering that around in these tiny bedrooms. We had to pull the beds out all the time just to get the cameras where we wanted them. It was full of furniture, and we just kept having to move them back in that giant hallway. So it was not easy. I did watch a lot of the Amityville films before. At that point, I'd only seen the first one. You know, I'm not a huge horror fan, but so I ended up watching, I guess there was 6 or 7. I'm not sure if this is number 8. I don't remember, but there's quite a few of them. So I watched as many as I could get on VHS at the time. Yeah, we had a pretty good art department, though. Jerry Fleming was the production designer, and he did a great job. He always does. And so he did the best he could do with the money we had and the time we had. I think we only had 2 models for the Dollhouse. I think there was, the reason we had 2 because we were going to blow it up eventually. We wanted a couple of takes at it. One of them, I think, had some walls we could remove to get the camera in there, but we didn't use any of the bore scopes or anything like that. We couldn't afford any of that, so it was just shot in there. That's why you can tell the really shallow depth of field in there. It makes it a little difficult, but it was a pretty decent little model. We did use some macro lenses in there. I don't recall exactly what we shot with. I think it was just Airy super speeds that we were shooting with, and probably had a 90mm macro, I think. Steve had produced a lot of movies, had a lot of experience producing, but no experience directing. And so I think he got a little bored with it because it was so tedious, you know, and having to be there much longer than he would have as a producer. But, you know, he tried, he did a good job, and he was very open to he pretty much let me block the sequences and decide on the way it'd look and all that, and he dealt with the actors. So that part was great. A lot of freedom. There was one sequence that I've been wanting to try, and I talked Steve into it, and it was a thing where the camera was going to be in the center of a kitchen table, a round table. And we would do a 360, and we did it, I think, twice. But the camera is too big to fit it in there, so we rented a periscope lens, and I had the camera underneath the table where the art department had cut a hole for it. So the periscope lens, you know, about 1.5 feet long, then the lens is mounted like this, and it would rotate. The problem was we couldn't afford a remote head. So I'm underneath the table spinning this thing, trying to keep my eye on the monitor, and, you know, going around and wrapping the cables up in there. And nobody else could really see it except for me. And, you know, when it turns backwards, your tilt is the opposite way. So it was very difficult. I think we only had time for like 3 takes. Plus the only way I had to light it, because you saw everywhere, was I hung a Chinese lantern right above the lens. So it's kind of flat, but it was kind of my only choice. Steve didn't make shot lists. He kind of let me do that. I didn't really shot list them per day, but we would block the scene, and then I would give him the shots that I think we need, and the script supervisor would write them down, so we'd work off that list, and we would just sort of make them as we went along for each sequence.
All right, midgets. Game over, go to bed.
Because we had so many underage actors in it, it was very difficult. We'd have to shoot out, you know, a couple of sequences, and then we would have to lose the kid for either school or they could no longer work that day, so then we'd have to jump to the other bedroom to shoot that. So we were going back and forth within scenes every day, and it was a continuity nightmare. Dead Dad was my favorite character, and it was very funny stuff, very strange. If I remember right, he had kind of a whitish makeup. So I did a lot of really low light, you know, like the Chinese lantern on the ground almost, and let it go up inside of his eyes. And, you know, like I say, we had very small lighting units in there because of the small locations. Shooting the makeup effects, you know, because of the short prep, nobody really knew what they were going to look like, or at least on my side, you know. So when they would show up, it'd be like, okay, now I need to have, you know, to show the texture or something, or to light down below, because I think they had really deep set eyes because of the prosthetics. So you had to put some front light on them, which you don't normally want to do. Roy did a great job, I thought. It was some pretty cool stuff, and there was a lot of it. And it was fun to light this stuff. I like doing it. You know, you always have the problems of seams, or, you know, and some days the makeup didn't quite work out or something, so you got to hide certain area things with shadows. But for the most part, it was pretty well done, I thought. I tried to make it very little fill. It was kind of a softer light, but with very little fill, so it did create the contrast. And but it was difficult getting the light to ping in the eye so we could really see the actor, you know, emotion and on these sequences.
Do it for me, Jimmy.
You'll feel a whole lot better if you do.
A lot of times it was a Chinese lantern I would hang right over the camera, dimmed way down, and it would just pop in their eyes. It brought them out. Well, as the more you shoot, the more you realize how dark you can go, you know, how under and how overexposed you can get. And most films, I always test the film stocks, you know, as much as I could if they would allow me to, you know. So I kind of got the idea of what I could get away with. It's tough on using the prosthetics because the latex does not react like the skin. So sometimes it really absorbs the light, sometimes it reflects it. So you had to go by eye. And, you know, it's not like today with HD where we could look at a monitor. Where they had to trust me. Yeah, there were sequences where the family went into the dollhouse itself. So the art department had built some areas that would match the set on stage. And then I believe we intercut it with the actual miniature. And it was a little difficult. You could definitely tell the difference, you know, but it was fun. Yes, we did several in-camera things. That was on a stage, and we had a fireplace that had the back removed. And then we would, you know, have the propane flames, and we had it really bright, so I had a really big stop, so she would stay in focus along with the fire, so it'd feel like she was there. I wished we could have got her a little closer. I think it would have looked better, but everybody's worried about her being too close to the flames, which is understandable. I believe a lot of it took place with the fireplace on, so we had like flicker lights and the Chinese lanterns on dimmers that we would just put real low. There was one part where I believe they come out of the fireplace, or maybe they're going in, I can't remember, and there's these beams of light come down, and that was a laser. A friend of mine that has a laser company, we brought him in there and he projected the laser beams around it like a force field or something. I don't remember what the actual purpose was, but I saw a clip from it and remembered that I had done that. It was very cool. You had to use the smoke and all that, but it came out pretty well, and it's so much better than doing an optical. You know, so I'm a big fan of in-camera effects, and I talked Steve into doing a bunch of those, and I think he wanted to as well. So as many times we could do in-camera effects, we did. We had 2 models for the house, and unfortunately we could only afford one super high-speed camera. I think it went 800 frames a second, which is just barely enough. We needed about 3 of those cameras. So we shot both times with that camera, and then I had 2 Arri 3s that would go 120 frames a second. You can definitely tell the difference how miniature it looks if you're not going fast enough. That's why some of those shots look pretty silly. But the 800 frames a second one, the flames look great. You know, it was pretty satisfying. I love shooting horror movies, even though I'm not a huge fan. I don't watch them a lot, but I love shooting them because I like to light very moody, dark stuff. I'm not a big high-key guy.
Wait your turn, Bill.
So the contrastier, the better. You know, the light against dark kind of layers. So just so much more fun to deal with. You can be so much more creative. And also lots of times I like to use, and which I did in this, is doing close-ups of people with super wide lenses. It just exaggerates, like the prosthetics, it really exaggerates the bumps and the scars and the blood and everything. So we did a lot of that. A lot of films that I like the looks of, you know, some of the standards like Seven, some of those sorts of things. I really liked what I did in Feast, a horror movie a few years back. I've done a lot of horror films, and I don't know, they're just so much more fun to work with, you know, and I'm going to be shooting one in Canada starting in a couple of weeks. Yeah, lots of times when I interview, they look at my resume and they almost always point out Amityville. I didn't see that one, or I saw that one, or they always had a question about it, you know, so people are very interested in the whole Amityville series. I think people love the Amityville shows. I think this was probably the corniest one of the group. You know, certainly the most ridiculous idea about the dollhouse. So, and I think it still has a little bit of a campy feel to it that people like, and I'm sure they get as many laughs or more laughs than scares, probably.